So, we have some stuff to talk about. Most notably, that I was wrong. I know. There's a first time for everything. But to be fair to myself, which I always like to be, I'm pretty sure almost everyone was wrong about this. Everyone was predicting that Critical Role would be moving over to Daggerheart for their fourth big campaign. I mean, it makes sense, right? Critical Role releases a brand new fantasy tabletop role-playing game that is meant to cater to the Critical Role playstyle. It makes sense that they use that game in their mainline show. But just recently, a couple days before recording this video, Critical Role announced on their YouTube channel that the fourth campaign would use Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the 2024 revamp specifically. And a lot of people were quite shocked by this. But while I did claim in my video that I expected Critical Role to use Daggerheart, I recorded that video before I met Mr. Matt Mercer. And in that fateful interview with Mr. Matt Mercer, he gave a couple of hints that made me change my mind internally and very much regret saying those things in that video. Okay, look, it was my bad. Bad take jail, okay? Put me in bad take jail. But yeah, the point is, I think I have some insight as to why they chose to use Daggerheart and some thoughts on the new format the show is going to be taking. I'm very excited to check out Critical Role Campaign 4. They're doing a lot of new things, so without further ado, let's start with why not Daggerheart. Okay, so not to brag, I met Matt Mercer. I know, I'm never going to bring it up again. It's really not that big of a deal. But anyway, in that video with Mr. Mercer, he said that he had been working with switching out with Brennan Lee Mulligan as Game Master for a really, really long time.
We've been talking about it for a long time, and I'm glad that we finally got to tell you all, because we've been cooking on this for a minute.
This is the first big hint. Critical Role Campaign 4 has been in production for a while. Like they said in the video announcing that they would use D&D, they said that these sort of things take a very, very long time to plan and coordinate, meaning that the planning for Critical Role Campaign 4 almost definitely predates the release and success of Daggerheart. They had no idea that Daggerheart was going to be as big as it is. I mean, that's pretty obvious from the fact that they've been selling out copies continuously. If they knew Daggerheart would be bigger, they probably would have printed more. But they didn't because they didn't know. And also, as Matt said, they still did print a ton of Daggerheart. It clearly caught them off guard. So it makes sense that they'd stick to something that is probably going to work, that being Dungeons & Dragons. I mean, there might be a universe out there in the multiverse where they release Daggerheart and it's a big ol' flop. Could you imagine if 3 months ago Daggerheart releases and the sales numbers are bad and the shelves are fully stocked with Daggerheart copies that no one's buying, and then they announce that they're using Daggerheart for Campaign 4? That would be a disaster. It would also be a disaster if they want to switch over to D&D, since, like Marisha said, these things take a lot of planning, and undoing all that plan to go back to D&D, what would that look like for the company? It was just better for them to wait and see what would happen and stick to Dungeons & Dragons for the main show. Matt also said in that interview that they were trying to minimize irresponsible risks with Daggerheart.
We were really, really excited and are very proud of this game, but you also never know.
Yeah.
You could very well release it and it just doesn't hit, the zeitgeist. And you don't want to overextend yourself to a financially irresponsible degree.
If you ask me, putting all your eggs in the Daggerheart basket before you know whether or not it's going to be successful, yeah, that's definitely taking an irresponsible risk. Especially since, and I know this is a controversial subject, Kandala Obscura was their previous big tabletop role-playing game release, and while I think that game is alright, a lot of people did not like it. And so, if Daggerheart got the same attention as Kandala did, it might be a big, big problem for Critical Role. Also, I just realized I mispronounced Kandala again. Look, it's a habit. I'm sorry. I'll know what to tell. The other big reason why they would avoid using Daggerheart and stick with D&D is the Game Master. It's not Matt Mercer, who worked on Daggerheart. It's Brennan Lee Mulligan. Brennan is known for DMing Dungeons & Dragons. Like he said in the announcement video, he's been playing D&D since he was 10 years old. Now, I am not doubting Brennan's skill here. I am sure he could run a banger Daggerheart game. He would be amazing. But why risk it? Already, you are risking a lot by replacing Matt Mercer as the game master, which, for the record, makes complete sense. Matt needs a break after 10 years of doing this. But are you going to also add in another hurdle for Brennan with having him run a system that he is less familiar with? It would be way better for him to run a game that he is intimately familiar with when he is stepping into such big shoes with taking the head of the Critical Role table. So yeah, those are, in my opinion, the 3 biggest reasons why they decided to use Dungeons & Dragons. And the main one just being, in general, uncertainty. They know Daggerheart works now. But, I mean, in the future, Daggerheart could be a flash in the pan. Like, we don't know what's going to happen with the game. And I think Critical Role made the right decision. Looking at all of this from a big picture, top-down level, it makes sense. Especially since a system change is not the biggest thing they're doing here. Oh boy. There are a ton of changes. We already brought up that Brennan Lee Mulligan is replacing Matt Mercer as the game master, but beyond that, we got a big cast to look at. We obviously have the 7 original founders, but they are being joined by Matt Mercer, who's stepping away from the Game Master chair, but also Luis Carrazzo, Robbie Damon, Abria Iyengar, Whitney Moore, and Alex Ward. Combine them with Laura Bailey, Taliesin Jaffe, Ashley Johnson, Liam O'Brien, Marisha Ray, Sam Riegel, Travis Willingham, and you have 13 players. Oh my god. Now, the mainline show on Crispy's Tavern used to be RPG Horror Stories. And if you guys watch RPG Horror Stories, you would have heard me whine over and over and over again about inexperienced game masters running games for tables that are too big. Dude, I think 8 players is too much for most people. Hell, I think 7 players is too much for most people. It's just lucky that Matt Mercer is not most people. But even for that guy, 13 players is a challenge. We know it's a challenge because we saw him run for just about that amount of people, and it was clearly tough. He did a good job, let me make it clear, but it's tough. Now, I'm sure Brennan agrees with me on that because he's not really running a game for 13 people. He's got to start with an overture that does have all 13 people at one table, but then the group are going to split up because for the first time ever, Critical Role is doing a West Marches style campaign. If you don't know what that is, West Marches is kind of like the, shared cinematic universe of TTRPG campaigns. There are 3 separate groups here, and each of them go through the same world and affect each other with decisions that they make. Again, a shared universe with different groups experiencing different stories. It is an interesting concept. The groups will be separated into the soldiers, who mostly solve their problems through fighting and blunt combat, the seekers, who are really invested in the lore and the magic, and the schemers, who are engaged in a cloak and dagger campaign where there could be enemies behind any corner. I love, for the record, all of these concepts. Soldiers, seekers, schemers. I mean, it's covering the big pillars of tabletop role-playing games, except here, it sounds way, way cooler. So good on Brennan for this. I am curious who's going to be in which group and what characters are going to make up the groups, but there are some concerns about the West Marches style as it applies to Critical Role. A big draw of Critical Role is the cast. It's arguably the biggest draw. The casts are lightning in a bottle. I've said this so many times, but they have chemistry like few other groups of people I have ever seen. Because of course they do. They've been friends for a really long time, and they've been playing this specific game for 11 years now? It makes sense they would get along. But now, with this West Marches game, we're going to be splitting up the party into a rotating cast of 13 people, coming in and out of their own groups. This means that you're not going to have the full original cast together for the vast majority of the show, and I get why that would make people nervous. The last big party split that Critical Role did during Campaign 3, yeah, it went very interestingly and had wonderful feedback. But I will say, you learn from making mistakes, for starters, but also, I feel like the issues of the Critical Role Campaign 3 party split that traumatized so many people, those issues are specific to the story of Critical Role Campaign 3 becoming frustrating for a lot of people. A lot of people were, by that point, frustrated with the God plot and Predathos and Ludinus and all of that, which had consumed the entirety of the Campaign 3 story. And during the party split, I think that was just the straw that broke the camel's back because it made it clear we weren't going away from that plot line anytime soon, if ever. So yeah, I think that was a big reason why people were so hostile to it. I think in a different game master, different context for the whole story, I think it could really, really work. I've been begging for Critical Role to go back to like the side quest formula, you know? We don't need the huge overarching god plot. But now it's time to go back to what, in my opinion, makes Critical Role so fun, and that's like the random shit, the fooling around, the shenanigans, the more down in the dirt adventures. These three groups could be all experiencing their own smaller scale stories, and I think that's interesting. Now, the West Marches format does have some other problems. Like, for example, I have concerns about the groups themselves, and I mean the scheduling behind the groups. Now, beyond that, I do have my own concerns about West Marches, even if I'm excited for it. Like, for example, if I'm a huge fan of the Schemer group, do I have to wait like a month for the whole group of schemers to be back together and interacting and going on an adventure while the soldiers and the seekers do their thing? If I'm like really not a fan of a specific group, like let's say, I don't know, hypothetically the soldiers just aren't my jam, like am I just gonna skip Critical Role that week? It is a bit of a concern. There's also, of course, the concern that West Marches in general is hard to run, though this one's not really a big deal to me. Brennan is a good game master. I usually give this concern to people who don't know what they're doing. Brennan's been doing this for a long time. I trust his judgment on this, and I trust he's going to be able to run a great West Marches. I just hope that I'm going to be able to experience it as an audience member and enjoy the show with characters that I love. Obviously, the ideal circumstance is that I love every single one of the groups and enjoy all their characters. I'm just dreading that one group isn't going to land with me and I'm going to have to skip their episodes because it's just not my vibe. That's exactly what happened during the party split. But yeah, overall, even with those concerns, I'm hyped. This whole cast is stacked with really talented people. It's awesome to see that every single one of the original Critical Role cast are sticking around. And frankly, if they're trying to solve the issue of scheduling being a strain on their lives, then this is a brilliant solution. Like Mr. Mercer said during our interview that running Critical Role felt like having 3 full-time jobs. And even though, obviously, he's the game master, he's putting in the most work, I'm sure that at least a bit of that went over to the players as well. If you're doing West Marches, though, it allows people to come in and out, take breaks. It is a good solution to the problem, and I'm glad to see it implemented. I just hope it's still going to be enjoyable to watch. But anyway, the other big change is the world. Ahriman, which is actually coincidentally very similar to one of my names, which that's interesting. But anyway, Ahriman is a world ravaged by the gods. They were really crappy towards the mortals they were supposed to oversee, so the mortals rebelled against them. They fought a titanic war, and the gods were defeated, cast down from their thrones, and the mortals now rule the world on their own lonesome. It's now been 70 years, and our heroes find themselves in a godless world, where magic runs rampant, and souls don't know what afterlife they're going to cross into. It's interesting and strangely familiar because this sounds very similar to the ending of Critical Role Campaign 3. It's just a little bit more violent. I am almost certain that there was a future where Brennan DMs Campaign 4 in Exandria. This sounds very similar to the state that Exandria was left in at the end of Campaign 3. If you're unaware, there, the gods don't get warred against, but they do get chased off. The gods all become mortal, and now, similar to this Ahriman world, Exandria is in a godless state. It would make complete sense that Ahriman could be Exandria like 300 years into the future, with the mythology of the gods' fall being blown up into a different version of history. In fact, I'm gonna try to pull the sound bit, but I'm pretty sure Matt did say that Brennan was looking at running an Exandria campaign. They just decided not to do it.
We had many discussions about, do we keep an Exandria, but more like, I don't know, I wanted to let him off the leash, if you
do
will.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It's clear that these aspects of Ahriman, the fall of the gods, the questions around magic, and the afterlife, it's clear that these are all leftover ideas from whatever Exandria campaign Brennan was going to run. So the question, of course, is, why didn't they just run that Exandria campaign if it's going to be so similar? Well, again, I think Mr. Mercer's interview gives a few answers to that. One of the big ones being, Exandria has been around for a long time, and when you've been building a world for that long in front of an audience, it starts to become a burden.
More or less do a lore and logic pass where I'm like, okay, are there any things that I came up with this that would contradict what I've already built for this? And then I go back and research previous sessions. I go and cross-reference older documents.
God, this is stressing me out just hearing about it. Oh my God. It sucks to say, but the fact that Matt needed to create a conspiracy board every time he created a session for Critical Role Campaign 3, the fact that he had to go back and reference years old lore so that fans wouldn't scream at him, that sucks. That's a big burden. And he created the frickin' world. Brennan is not the creator of Exandria. Expecting him to go back and reference lore that he didn't even make, I think it's unreasonable. It's better to let him spread his wings and do his own thing with the concept. And frankly, this concept is awesome. I was really whingy about the ending of Critical Role Campaign 3, made a whole critical failure episode about it, and I felt like a lot of the problems with the gods disappearing, they were sort of just glossed over. Here, this is what the campaign is about. Even if it's in a new world, I'm still glad to see those themes and concepts explored. So I, for one, am excited, even though the concept art did disappoint me a bit, I'll be honest. Obviously, Brennan loves traditional European medieval fantasy. You know, like Azeroth, Middle-earth, Westeros, Exandria itself. These are obviously fantasy topics that he's familiar with and that he really, really loves. So I'm glad he's running a setting that he enjoys, he's clearly excited about. I was hoping that they would step away from this sort of traditional fantasy setting because we've been DMing Exandria for so long, and if we're gonna stick to the same flavor of setting, we might as well stay in Exandria. But knowing how much of a burden Exandria's lore was on Matt, I'm glad they decided to move away from Exandria, even if they are keeping some of the same flavor. I'm still excited to see what new mysteries this world will bring. With that, we've discussed pretty much everything that was in that announcement video, so the question remains, is it going to be good? Bro, I don't freaking know. How am I supposed to know? I haven't seen the show yet. We know so little about how this West Marches game is going to operate to the point where I think it is extremely premature to make any sort of decision on whether or not you think Critical Role Campaign 4 is worth tuning into. I do think the decision to stick with D&D, it is a bit of a shame. I loved how in Age of Umbra, the cast were clearly very excited with the idea of something new, with playing Daggerheart, a game that they created, and they seem to be having a real blast, to the point where I almost thought they were kind of hamming it up a little bit. But I mean, I don't think that's the case. I think they were just genuinely enjoying something new, especially since when my group switched to another game, they were similarly very invigorated and excited. However, I don't think Critical Role should be taking big risks when it comes to their business. Critical Role is not like a huge brand by any means. They cannot sustain too much of bad news, and putting all their eggs in a Daggerheart basket if Daggerheart blows up in the future, that's just a bad idea. I do hope in the future they explore other games though. D&D is great. I like Dungeons & Dragons a lot. It's where I got my start. But as I've played other games, I found that other games offer something new and different. And seeing the Critical Role cast play other games in the future, I think it would be great. Daggerheart is still going to be present on the Critical Role channel, obviously, and I do see a future where far off, maybe Campaign 5, they do switch over to Daggerheart as their main system if Daggerheart continues to be as successful it has been. But for now, I am excited for Critical Role Campaign 4. I'm excited to see what Brendan is cooking up, and I'm hoping you guys will be right alongside me watching the premiere. But with all this excitement around Critical Role Campaign 4, what about the people who aren't excited? What about the people who are really hoping that in this huge cast we might see a 14th member, an old member, returning to the table? Yes, my friends, the crash out that's been months in the making. I think it's time for us to come back to it. Jeremy is returning to Critical Failure, because his obsession with Tiberius Stormwind and Orion Akaba, it got so much worse. Look forward to that this Friday. But in any case, if you guys enjoyed and you were loyal to the tavern, then please do leave the comment Campaign 4 So let me know you made it to the end of the video. If you want to see more of our content, then you might enjoy my review of Critical Role Campaign 3's ending. It's an oldie but a goodie from a few months ago. It's linked up in the cards, but before you go, please do leave a like on this one and subscribe to Crispy's Tavern so you don't miss any of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to support us directly, then you can head over to our Patreon where I can give you exclusive D&D and Draw Steel content. In essence, like, comment, subscribe, support. I will see you all next time. Farewell. And very much regret saying those things that